Yes, we are back, Steeler Nation, with another great episode of the Sick Podcast, Steeler Crazy. I am Jay York Football. Alongside of me, as always, show him that shirt.
Tell
Mic'd
you
up
what,
Sports One.
shout out Taylor, Shopians, always bleeping or open bleeping always. Funny thing about this George Pickens, I guess nose tape or whatever he wore is the grammar is not really good. It should have been always bleeping open. So to add injury to insult, I suppose. That was strange, but makes for a cool shirt.
Yeah. Well, we have a great guest today. We know the draft is coming up. So, Shane, let's get down to business.
Turn up your volume. Because you're about to listen to The Sick Podcast. Steelers Crazy.
Harris Smith shields. Flacco. Polamalu takes it home. Super Bowl 43. Pittsburgh might be bound for that thanks to number 43.
The sickest Pittsburgh Steelers podcast.
Sports entertainment like no other. It's gonna be sick.
All right, man, I'm getting a little bit tired of the offseason roller coaster that is impending free agency. So it's always good to chat, of course, with somebody who is dynamic in the college football landscape. He covers it all, man. He is doing college football, host of College Football Overtime, Sirius XM, radio host as well, Commanders, and some other gigs. We are excited to welcome on Denton Day. They call him D-Day. D-Day, what's up, man?
Fellas, what's going on? I appreciate you guys making some time for me this afternoon.
Of course.
We appreciate you doing that for us, and we're excited to pick your brain a little bit over here. First of all, man, I have to ask. We ask everybody that jumps on, whether they're from, Australia, China, Pittsburgh, or California. Your thoughts on Fields and Wilson? What as a, did you like Fields coming out of college? Are you somebody who, believes in Russell Wilson still somehow? Where do you stand, and what do you think the Steelers should do?
I did like Justin Fields a lot coming out of college, to be honest. I saw him play in that playoff game against Clemson where he takes that big shot, bad rib, and then still hangs nearly 50 on one of the better defenses in the league. That was probably the best game that he's played in his life. Like, if you take all the pro stuff, all the college stuff, that one was it. So I thought there was going to be a level of skill that he brings with the arm strength and then the mobility that really has never materialized in the NFL. I don't know if that is like to blame for Chicago because they royally screwed up his first couple of years or what, but it feels like he just never made the connection. As far as Russell Wilson goes. I mean, are you guys pro Russell Wilson? Like, can I dunk on this? I've never been a Russ guy. Now, he did play one of his best games of the season against my Washington Commanders with that late touchdown pass to Mike Williams, so I had to eat it a little bit there. But this goes like way back to the Seattle days. There's something about him that has never connected with me. I think he's been a fine player for a long, long time, but he always has this cliff that he falls off of at the second half of the season. So I've never really been a Russ guy. I think they squeezed as much out of him as they could this year. And for your guys' sake, I think he needs to leave the kitchen. He can go cook somewhere else, and Pittsburgh needs to find another quarterback.
You can dunk on him. You can go all Mac McClung today on Russ. Jordan was big on Russ, and he was right for the first 4 or 5 games when he did play well against the Commanders, won his first handful, and then you're right, he did fall off that cliff, no question. And I'm very pro Justin, so would love to see him back in black and gold because I think there's still some untapped potential, as you mentioned. It's a fine transition, however. You're a college football expert. How is this draft class in terms of quarterbacks? And specifically quarterbacks outside of Shedeur Sanders and Cam Ward, who obviously aren't going to be anywhere close to available when the Steelers are picking at 21.
I think there has been maybe a little bit of over the top when people are calling this quarterback class bad. And I think a lot of that is because you had last year's class that was so good, and you have 6 guys that are taken in the first 12 picks, but it's not exactly a good class. Like, even if you take Cam Ward and Shedeur Sanders, as good as you think that they are, if you were to put them in last year's class, the earliest they're going is 5th out of the guys that were taken, I would say. So I think there's talent there. Pittsburgh is in a really unique spot because I do think Jackson Dart is a guy that people are going to fall in love with. And I do think there is some NFL potential there, but he's definitely not a top 10, top 15 pick. So if the Steelers want to go in that direction, he's going to be available, but he also might not be guaranteed in the first round. So like if you want to trade back, you might still be able to do that and get him in the second round or get him later in the first round, maybe stockpile a little more picks that you can then use elsewhere. I know wide receiver is a need for the Steelers, and this is a class that has a lot of wide receivers that are going to be available in days 2 and 3 that might be able to be plug and played immediately. So I think Jackson Dart is a name that people are going to be looking at. Quinn Ewers has been so up and down. He's played really good in big games, and then this year he played really not good in big games. Those 2 Georgia performances were where you were really hoping that he was going to do what he did 2 years ago against Alabama, walking into Tuscaloosa and hanging with one of the baddest programs in the nation. And against Georgia at home, it felt like they gave him the yips. He had to take a seat on the bench. He let Arch Manning come in because he needed to settle himself a little bit. I do think there are going to be some scouts that look at that and be like, if you can't handle Georgia at home, like it's not like you're going into this crazy, like this is your place and you are getting flustered. What are you going to do in the NFL? So I think there's a number of scouts that look at him now, maybe with a much different view than what they had coming into this year.
Yeah, I'm not necessarily a scout, but I feel the exact same way. Touch on some of those receivers. I think probably similar to quarterback. It's not the best class, right? It does feel like there are some guys in that 21 range, maybe, the Igbukas, the Goldens that could be, maybe a fit for the Steelers. But are there any guys that, who are jumping off the page to you at this point or that you really enjoyed watching last year?
I love Luther Burden. I'm a huge Luther Burden fan. I think a lot of people are going to look at Travis Hunter, and Travis Hunter is the best player in the class because he can do both. McMillan out of Arizona is a guy that's going to be really high up on draft boards. But if you want to talk about like a receiver's receiver, a guy that can run every single route, Luther Burden is that. He's a big-time player, man. And Missouri wasn't all that spectacular this year, but he was really, really good for them, even despite the fact they had all their offensive troubles. If he's around at 21, that's the pick for Pittsburgh because I think he's a top 10 talent. It's just this class is a little weird, but if he's around at 21, he's the one.
Jordan, you could jump in. I know you want to talk about another position Steelers probably are going to need to address because it seems like only Jaylen Warren might be back.
Yeah, talk about that rookie running back class.
Ashton Jeanty is the top one, right? I mean, he's the one, and
he's been going around. I've seen that. I like that.
He has Dallas Cowboy written all over him.
He's not
Jerry is going to love him at 12. I like Omarion Hampton out of UNC. I think he's really, really good, and he's a guy that can do a couple of different things. You can't go wrong, I don't think, with either of the Ohio State guys, Travion Henderson, Quinshot Judkins. It really is going to come down to, I think, personality. What do you want in your locker room? I think they're both really good guys, but they're very different guys. Henderson is a guy that I've seen a long, long time. He's local. He's from the state of Virginia, so I watched him a little bit when he was in high school. So to see him rise up through the ranks and be as good as he has been at Ohio State's been impressive. And Quinshot Judkins has been, obviously he played in the SEC. He comes over to Ohio State, fits right in with what they're trying to do and wins a championship. My general rule of thumb is if you love the person, you can never go wrong with drafting guys that have won a national championship. I think if you're trying to build a culture in the NFL or you're trying to maximize it, those guys know what they're doing, and they seem to have the easiest transition from college to the NFL. Some other guys, Sampson at Tennessee is a guy that can do a bunch of different things. I know a lot of people don't love Iowa just because Iowa has been boring as hell to watch for like the past 3 seasons, but Caleb Johnson's another guy that could be available maybe as late as day 3 in the early portion of day 3 that I think you can get him and he can play probably pretty immediately. Maybe not like 20 carries on week 1, but you can draft him in week 1. He'll be able to handle the ball, anywhere from 8 to 12 times, I think. So there's a lot of really good guys that are available, and they're coming at the right time because, as you guys know, it seemed like there was a resurrection of the running back position this year.
Yeah, I think Saquon Barkley had a lot to do with that as well. Hopefully get some guys what they pay for because we all know
national champions. The Eagles are Georgia, and there's a team that's won. You talk about that transition. You're right.
Yeah, talk about some guys you're high out of this draft class, and then some guys that you're not so that are kind of like overhyped.
My favorite player is Abdul Carter. I loved what he did at the end of the season. Penn State's defense has for years been really, really good, but he was spectacular. It didn't matter who he was playing. I know Penn State didn't play against great teams in the college football playoff, just the way that seeding worked out. But even against Oregon, even against Ohio State at points in the year, you saw a lot from him that made you he popped off the screen towards the end of the year. And I always love it when guys play really, really well as the season progresses. It's really easy to play well against a bunch of nobodies at the beginning of the year when you're doing the non-con and you're basically paying to beat up on guys. But playing well at the end of the season has been really, really impressive. I would say James Pierce Jr. is a guy that you look at and you're like, all right, I see the talent there, but everything that I've heard about him outside of the football field is I don't know that teams are going to love what's going on there. If you can do just the football with him, he's excellent. I mean, he's not Abdul Carter good on the edge, but I think he's the closest to him when it comes to guys that can get after the passer. And you guys know that's at a premium in the NFL. But he's a guy that I do feel like could end up maybe falling a little bit. And Will Johnson is a guy that came into this year as one of the top corners in the NFL. And because of some of the issues that Michigan had and because of some of the injuries that he had throughout the course of the season, he's another guy that could end up falling well short of what we thought he was going to be drafted at just a couple of weeks ago.
Man, it would be a dream if Luther Burden fell to the Pittsburgh Steelers at 21. I tweeted it the other day. He was a top 5, mock draft selection. It felt like in if you're looking in 2024 mocks or 2023, right? And it feels like Ted McMillan has jumped him. For good reason. He's a beast. But man, that would be a huge blessing if you're a Steelers fan. Another blessing. Would you guys, Commanders, do us a favor and take Myles Garrett off our hands?
Trust me, if I could take Myles Garrett off your hands, I definitely would. I'd give up a kidney to get Myles Garrett in D.C. At the end of the year, Washington was sending their defensive tackles out there to set the edge because no one that they paid at the edge position could actually do it. Dante Fowler had a solid year if you just look at the sack numbers, but he played 16 snaps in the NFC Championship game because he can't stop the run. At the very least, Myles Garrett can do that and makes life a lot easier for everybody else. Trust me, if I'm Adam Peters, I am yelling and screaming at him to make that call and to make Cleveland say no.
Yeah, I think it makes a lot of sense, and it would certainly be nice to ship him off to the NFL. That would be huge. We're hanging out, of course, with Denton Day. You can find him on X at the Denton Day. Hey, I want to ask you before we jump off here, just some general free agency thoughts. I mean, it feels like obviously with the expanded salary cap, we're going to have some serious money being tossed around at some of these guys. Obviously from a Steelers perspective, going to be looking at some receivers, some defensive linemen. Is there anybody, in this free agency class, maybe at the receiver position that you think would make a really good Pittsburgh Steeler?
Chris Godwin is a guy that I really like. He's a guy that I want Washington to end up with. I think when you see big names, obviously the T. Higgins thing, he is more likely than not staying in Cincinnati. If not on a long-term deal on the franchise tag, my guess is they pay Jamar Chase and then they pay T. Higgins once they get the Chase thing settled out. But he's a big miss for everybody else. Because when you looked at this class, it was, whoa, T. Higgins, and then a little bit of a drop-off. But I still like Chris Godwin. I know Cooper Kupp seems like he's going to be available. I think Los Angeles wants to get off of him and go in a different direction. We've had some passionate conversations in D.C. about whether or not you want to go get Cooper Kupp. He's a little older. He had a top 5 season in 2021, but outside of that, he hasn't exactly been spectacular. Injuries are a reason for that. Deebo Samuel's in that same boat. Really, really good in 2021. And outside of that, you're like, well, I mean, he wasn't worth maybe the money that he was commanding, but it does feel like, Deebo is nice to have because he can do so many different things offensively. So if you are Pittsburgh and you decide we're going to give Justin Fields another go, having a guy that could line up on the outside, in the slot, in the backfield, doing all these things, I feel like would help a guy like Justin Fields, or if they draft a quarterback, whatever direction they decide to go in. I do think the versatility of Deebo is what you're getting from him, but I don't know that he is your number one wide receiver. Hey, we need a big catch. We're going to come your direction. Go get the football kind of a guy.
Agree.
Yeah. Well, it's been great hanging out with you, talking the draft now. You're getting me excited already. for this. It's the most wonderful time of the year. You can ask Mike how many mock drafts he probably already has. He's been doing it since literally
trying to cool off a little bit.
But I could attest that this man has been going hard since we were at least in 6th or 7th grade. So still going now. But just tell everyone what you have coming up next. I'm sure you got a lot of great draft coverage. I know you do the Sirius XM. Just tell everyone, our viewers, where they can find you and what you have coming up next.
Yeah, you can find me on Twitter at @TheDenton, and I'll be popping up periodically on different airwaves, doing some draft stuff. I'm like you. This is one of my favorite times of the year. It's so fun to go back and watch guys that I watched in college, but I watched them in college in the lens of college football and championships and conferences and all those things. So now to be able to watch them again and see, all right, who can actually excel in the NFL is always a lot of fun. I appreciate you guys having me. This was a lot of fun.
Yeah, likewise. And
enjoy Myles Garrett.
I was fortunate a few years ago to go to the Combine, and it was honestly one of the coolest experiences of my life. Just being out, you're just in such a confined area. Like I said, you're walking off Kurt Warner's, getting off of the, Matt High. It was like everyone who lost to the Steelers I was seeing. So it was kind of funny because I had a Steeler hat on. But yeah, just being in that atmosphere and, watching those guys' lives change, and hopefully, for you, the Commanders, and us, they'll be in black and gold. But all great stuff, man. Keep up the great coverage, and we'll definitely have you on soon.
Yeah, fellas, appreciate it.
Take care. Thanks, Denton. Yeah, it's nice to switch it up a little bit, and kind of focus on the draft, because it's like quarterback, this and that. And it's like, it just kind of breaks up the monotony of things, because honestly, it's just it's the same 3 topics. But I mean, that's what it is. Who's going to be the Steelers quarterback? Who's going to be the Steelers running back? But the draft is like a fresh breath air. So excited for it.
That. I'm just kind of sick of it at this point. It's what we have to talk about. It's the biggest news in Pittsburgh Steelers.
It's honestly like the Steelers do this on purpose. Yeah. They just drag it on, and it's like they're really not. It's just
we are going to know soon, and then we can dissect that, talk about it, but until then, it'd be nice to make a pact not to, but it's going to happen.
Yeah. Right. Yeah, I mean, I just think that, I feel like we've said this for the past 9 years. I mean, it's just something needs to give. You have to take a risk. I mean, you could apply this to anything in life. You have to take a risk and come up with a plan and hope that it works out. And if it doesn't, then maybe it really is time to, clean shop and rebuild and have a 4 or 5 year plan, as opposed to, hey, we're going to win the Super Bowl, because it hasn't happened. Yeah. And I just, at this point, the best way to describe it is I just feel like the Steelers are lost in the sauce.
Lost in the sauce, no doubt. And maybe Sauce Gardner's best buddy with the Jets, Aaron Rodgers, will come over and change things. You never know, man. That's what somebody said today. I think it made a lot of sense. I think it was Jarrett Bailey, actually.
I see the Sean Allen with our guy.
He said the Jets, pursuing Justin Fields, and I think that might be the case. And I think they could offer him more money than the Steelers would, given the context of just kind of how desperately they would need a young quarterback to come in there. And if that happened, maybe they just swap. Maybe it's Rodgers in Pittsburgh and Fields in New York. So we'll see.
I just we'll end on this note. If I would have told you that Russell Wilson was going to be
Rodgers,
and then Rodgers, Justin Fields, okay, a little bit believable, but you would have told me just leave.
It would feel like playing Madden. It wouldn't even.
It feels like we're living in a simulation right now.
Fantasy football.
The way that the state of the world is right now. I mean, it's everything is
fantasy football.
Exactly. But hey, as always, it's been great. Really great episode. Just glad to talk something other than, the same 3 topics. So really great stuff from Denton. Make sure you give us a follow, a like, and subscribe. The Sick Podcast, Steeler Crazy, J York Football, Mic'd Up Sports 1. Enjoy your guys' weekend.
And that's a wrap. Hope you don't miss us too much until next time. Follow the Sick Podcast Steelers Crazy on YouTube, Instagram, Facebook, Google Play, and Apple Podcasts.